If you're like a lot of our homebuyer clients, when you're starting to view homes, the whole process can be a bit overwhelming. What should you look for? What should you be aware of? How do agents approach a property? How do you make sure you know what to look for so you're not entirely relying on your agent to point things out to you? In this video, I'm going to give you an overview of how I approach a property as a broker who's been inside thousands of homes, from the location to considerations based on age, as well as potential red flags to be on the lookout for that could save you time and money by weeding out houses that aren't a good fit. Now, this video isn't meant to be a substitute for having an experienced agent on your side when buying, and certainly not in lieu of having any professional inspections done on the property during your investigation period. Instead, this is intended to help you create awareness of various factors that could impact your decision on buying a particular property, all based on the things you can visually observe when viewing a home. And by the way, if you're new to the channel and you like informative videos about all things real estate, especially but not exclusive to Southern California, be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss future videos like this when they come out. So before we start, every home's going to have issues. Whether this is a new construction, whether it's 100 years old, 10 years old, whatever, every property is going to have some things going on with it. And if you find one that's perfect, you hit the jackpot. It's very rare. Most property, there's going to be trade-offs. And one of the big things to keep in mind is what trade-offs are worth it for you. So this isn't going to be telling you what's good or bad, right or wrong, but more so helping you be aware of these things, then you can decide whether or not these are an issue for you or not. One of the first things is obviously going to be location. So what's the neighborhood like? You're probably going to already have a good idea as to what you're going to expect when you're viewing the property online. But as you get there, look around. What kind of neighborhood am I in? Is it an HOA? Are the rules enforced? Is this a neighborhood that was all built around the same time? Do the homes have different ages? And just sort of anything that's going to influence your property. Is your home a bit different than others? Is it an older home? Is it a newer home? Is it the worst home on the best block? Is it the best home on the worst block? You want to kind of get an idea as to how your home fits into the neighborhood. Is the neighborhood changing? Is there a lot of commercial that's being converted to residential or vice versa? Anything that could suggest rezoning, anything that could affect the desirability of the property that you're looking at. So as you're driving up to the property, as you're driving through the neighborhood, these are things to pay attention to before you even get to the site. Also, you want to look at pride of ownership. Are the homes around you taking care of their property? Whether or not you like it, this is going to impact the desirability of your home relative to the other homes. As you're driving through, look at things like, how are the roads maintained? Is this one of the roads that hasn't gotten any funding for repairs in the last 10 years? Also things like, are the power lines overheaded or are they undergrounded? You know, in a lot of neighborhoods in San Diego, there's a plan for undergrounding all the power lines, but there's many neighborhoods that don't have funding for that yet. Things like that can really improve or downgrade the desirability of the property. And we'll talk about that more here in a minute because there's more than just the desirability of the aesthetics when it comes to power lines. Things like how it's placed in the lot. Is this a corner lot? If you're looking at building on the property and you have a corner lot, that's going to affect your setbacks and your buildable area. Generally, street frontage setbacks, i.e. the distance from the road that the structure can be built at, is generally going to be more for street front setbacks. How is the structure set in the lot? Is it in the middle? Is it in the center of the lot? Is it a little bit to the back? Is it a little bit to the front? You want to think about this in terms of how you plan to use the property. Now look at your surroundings. How about road noise? Are you near a major street? Are you maybe within earshot of a highway or a train station? And also, it's important to keep in mind resaleability here. So even if maybe you were a few blocks from the train tracks or you were near a highway and the noise doesn't bother you, you also want to think about, hey, if this is an investment, if this is anything other than you're just buying a property for you to live in for the next 20 years and you have no concerns about resale value, you want to keep in mind, hey, what are most buyers going to think of this property? If I were to get in a situation, I needed to put this for sale next year, what are the potential downsides that another buyer is going to think about when it comes to this property? So generally speaking, if you're close to a highway, within earshot where you have a significant constant noise from the freeway, that's going to be a desirability factor for most buyers. And it's important for you to know that that might cut as much as 50, 60, sometimes more % of buyers away from the property just due to factors like that. Also think about privacy. How close are you to the neighbors? How much noise issues is there going to be, whether it's coming from you or from them? How's the topography? Do you have a sloped lay to the land? Is it flat and level? Is there a negative slope from the topography towards the structure that you're going to need additional drainage for? Do they have that drainage set up properly? Another thing to think about, if it's important to you, in some cultures this is of more importance than others, is what's the direction the property is facing and how does this impact your feel at the property? Are you getting early morning sun? Are you getting cut off from the hillside in the back? Maybe the sun sets an extra 30, 40 minutes early for you just because you blocks the view of the sun as it's going down. Maybe you're viewing it in the summer and it feels great right now because it's a little bit cooler and it's hot outside, but how's that going to impact you in the winter? If you're in a canyon, you're going to have a lot more dampness, a lot less sun. And you know, we're in San Diego. There's a lot of different unique lays to the land depending on where you go. So these are things that are very important for you to pay attention to when you're viewing properties. Now, as we're walking up to the property, is this a single story? Is it a 2-story? If you have steep terrain and you have a lot of exterior on this property that you're going to need to maintain, stucco, wood siding, etc., you're going to want to think about your maintenance costs. And if you have a steep terrain in the back, you can bet that it's going to cost you more when it comes time to repaint, when it comes time to re-stucco, when it comes time to do a repair. Many contractor companies do not own their own scaffolding, so they got to account for renting that out, which can be thousands of dollars. So many times your maintenance costs are going to be tied into the terrain and how much outdoor footage, square footage you have to maintain. So just based on the setting of the property there, it can look great. Maybe it's well maintained now and it might not look like a big deal, but believe me, in a few years, there's going to be some maintenance to do on the property. How easy is it to access the roof? If it's a more dangerous and treacherous roof, if it's higher up, you might expect higher costs for risk management when it comes to your bids. Another thing on the exterior, how's the driveway look? Are there cracks? Is it a new driveway? Are the cracks big? If it's a new driveway, look across the street. Look at other properties. Do they have new driveways as well? There are some neighborhoods you'll see where every other home has a brand new driveway, it seems. And you might think this is a nice thing. Oh, it's great pride of ownership. But in reality, this could also point to a lot of soil movement to the point that people's driveways started breaking so much that it was so bad they had to replace the driveway. So sometimes things like that are counterintuitive, but there could be red flags. Of course, in California, soil movement, seismic activity is something you should be aware of. So this is something to definitely keep an eye on as you're looking at properties. Now, another thing, we're at the front of the property, we're looking at the place. Are there any big trees or big shrubs in the front yard between the house and the street? Now, if you're in a more rural area and you have septic as opposed to sewer, this might not be as big of a concern. But if you have a big tree or anything growing in the front yard, be aware that this could cause sewage issues. If there is a main sewer line that's directly underneath a tree, and especially if this is an older home, maybe you have cast iron plumbing, there's going to be a much higher probability that you're going to have some sewer issues down the road because those roots will find their way into those pipes. Now, in addition to a regular home inspection, you're always going to want to get a sewer line scope. It's only a couple $100 typically, and this is priceless information. Many times roots in these pipes. Definitely something you're going to want to do. Now, we talked about power lines before. As you're walking up to the property, are the power lines overhead or are they trenched? How does this come into play? Well, if, for example, you want to add solar to your property or maybe get some whole house battery backups or add some circuits, maybe you have a 100 amp electrical panel and you need to upgrade to a 200 amp. Depending on the age the property was built and if it's trenched, you might have to upgrade the supply line to that electrical panel. Now, if it's overhead, that's a lot easier to do. If it's underground and you need to trench, then we could be talking thousands of dollars more in cost there. Another thing when you're looking at the electrical panel is there a gas meter just next to it, a few feet away? In many parts of Southern California, it's a few feet away, and they've changed code so that if you're going to get a permit for upgrading your electrical panel, then many times you cannot have it within a certain distance of the gas meter. And many times this is where they were installed, very close to each other. So you're going to actually have to reposition the electrical panel when you replace it, which again is going to add more money to the cost. So important to keep that in mind so you don't have unexpected costs. Also, as we're outside, look at the roof. What kind of roof do we have? Do we have a tile, terracotta? Is it asphalt shingles? If it's shingles, you can see often how the roof is aging. Are there any exposed shingles? If it's a dark roof and you're seeing kind of light gray or white areas of the roof, it's not always evident from the ground, but if you look closely, you can often see some signs if it's towards the end of its life. Look closely and see if there's any areas where the fiberglass is starting to become exposed. That's generally going to indicate this thing is on the last legs of its life. Also, another thing, if you're looking at the ground around the property, now sometimes if there's good gutter systems, you might not see this, but many times you'll also see some granules from the roof towards the ground in front of the structure. So if you're seeing granules like that, it's often a sign that the roof is on its last legs, and a roof in Southern California, we're easily talking $12,000, $15,000, $20,000, $25,000, something to keep in mind. Another thing, look at the roof. Is it two-dimensional shingles? So are the shingles all the same thickness? Two-dimensional shingles are generally going to have shorter warranties. We're talking 20, 25 years. For three-dimensional shingles, where you're going to have that variation, some areas it's going to be double layer, you're often 30, 40 years on the life expectancy of these things. While you're looking around too, now you're not going to be a termite inspector, you're going to get a termite inspection if you're in Southern California, but if you can see any visible dry rot or termite looking decay on areas like the rafter tails or the eaves or fascia, these are going to be telltale signs that you probably have some termite activity. We're in Southern California. It happens to every property, whether it's 2 years old or 200 years old. Generally, if you can see stuff visually, there's often going to be a lot more underneath the surface that you can't see. Now, if we're looking at a stucco home, like many homes in Southern California, towards the bottom, there's an area that's a few inches off the ground, and that's where you should have what's called a weep screed. Because stucco is porous, water is going to get inside of it, it absorbs moisture, and then it goes down with gravity, and then it should have a drip edge to drip out. And if that was not installed in the most recent stuccoing of the property, then that can lead to accelerated decay of the stucco, moisture intrusion, and other issues in the house and towards the foundation. So something to be aware of. It's something that you can see visually very easily, very distinctly. Now, if we have older homes that are like wood siding, let's say 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, some of these old school original homes, especially if they've been maintained with the same aesthetic from when they were built, they can look very nice. But let me tell you, there's a lot of work involved in keeping those things looking very nice. So caulk and paint are going to be your best friends, and you're going to have to use a lot of that throughout the year, many times through the year. Many of these homes also, just FYI, if they're built prior to 1978, they are presumed to have lead paint in them. So especially the exterior with the wood siding, you're going to see a lot of that flaking, heavy, chipped paint. And when that stuff falls off, it's considered a hazard. And if you have pets or small children that could be playing around the house, things to be aware of. There's going to be some flaking paint through the years. And then again, just the maintenance of that stuff. Also, does the property have any retaining walls? If you're on a slope, maybe you have one in the backyard, maybe you have it on the front or on the sides of the property. Retaining walls are something that if they're above a certain height, generally 3 to 4 feet, they require permitting. And if it's not done the right way, you could be asking for trouble. And many times you'll see these things that have been there for a long time. The wall still looks intact, but if you look closely, you might actually see it slanting in the wrong direction. And if you see a slanting retaining wall, then you could have some issues. But if you have a retaining wall that's on a property line, for example, or whether it's a retaining or not, a concrete wall, and it's leaning in one way or the other, you want to pay attention. That could be a safety concern for you or anybody living in the property or for the neighbors, as well as a hefty price tag when it comes time to repair that. And as you're walking around the property, are there any areas of the grading or the poured concrete, the sidewalk around the house, where there's any negative slope where water would run towards the structure as opposed to away from it? Sometimes this happens just from settling of the concrete when it's poured. Other times things are done the wrong way. So Pay attention to this stuff if it's readily visible. Another thing, is it a raised foundation or is it on a slab? If it's on a slab, you're gonna have a much more solid feel. You're not gonna have that echoey feeling like when you're walking around, like you're walking on a drum, like you might if you have a raised foundation. On the other hand, raised foundations make things a lot easier in many ways. Raised foundations, you have a crawl space, and you're generally gonna have an access point somewhere around the outside. It's not a lot of space, generally speaking, but if you're gonna run new plumbing, for example, it's gonna be a lot easier to do. If you have a slab, you might have to jackhammer all throughout the slab, rip up floors, move furniture, move built-ins, etc. So there's a lot of differences that come from slab to raised foundation. There's pros and cons to each. Something to think about with raised foundation homes, and many homes that were built in the 70s and 80s didn't have the thickest subfloor underlayment. And if you don't have 3/4 inch subfloor and you're laying tile on a subfloor, you're gonna see a lot more movement in that, and that tile's not gonna last very long. You're gonna see grout movement, you're gonna see chunks of grout coming out, you're gonna see cracked tiles. So tile floors on a slab, personally, I prefer it much more than on a raised foundation. Same thing with second stories. Even some of these newer construction properties, after 5-10 years, you're gonna see some of these tile floors in the bathrooms upstairs already are cracking and failing. So now let's talk about the age of the home, because depending on when a house was built, there's different things to look for. Let's just go through this really quick. 1980s or earlier, check for ABS piping, black plastic or PVC, the white plastic. If it still has cast iron, you can look in places like the laundry room, look at the washer discharge thing. If that's still cast iron, you might have cast iron throughout the house. Definitely get a sewer line scope during your investigation period. If it has black ABS in there or other places that are visible, you might already have upgraded plumbing. That could be good. 1979 or earlier, watch for popcorn ceilings. These not always, but many times had asbestos. There is an easy way to check for that during investigation. If you're buying a property that was built in 1979 or earlier and it has popcorn ceilings, you can take a small sample. We can give you a contact to send it to an environmental lab where they can test it, generally give you results the next day. And you can tell if it has asbestos in there, because it's definitely something that you want to know. If you're going to scrape those popcorn ceilings, you need to know if that stuff's got asbestos in it or not. Another thing, 1979 or earlier, is transite asbestos pipes. You'll often see this in the garage above a water heater or above the furnace, the vent pipe that goes to the roof. It kind of looks like a concrete pipe, generally towards the roof. Most of the time, if people are remodeling a property, they just don't touch this. They'll do anything they can to not touch it, because technically if you don't disturb it, it doesn't create a risk of having any airborne asbestos. But if it's present in the house, it needs to be disclosed if you're aware of it. So if you're buying a property with it and you plan to do renovations, it's important to know of, because if you have to hire a licensed abatement company to remove it, it's going to cost you a lot more than if you didn't have to hire them. 1960s and earlier, check for two-prong outlets, which would be ungrounded wiring. This is very common into the 60s. Now, something that wasn't standard until the 1950s and wasn't really enforced until the 1970s is insulation in California. So many homes built even prior to the 70s, but especially 1950s and prior, did not have insulation in the walls. This could affect everything from the efficiency, the overall temperature and feeling of the home, to even potentially moisture issues between the walls. Now, on the inside of the house, things that might be counterintuitive, that might be cool features, can also potentially be downsides. So does the home have vaulted ceilings? This could be a big inefficiency for heating and cooling, and you have all this kind of dead air up here, but you got to heat and you have to cool all of that. Things to keep in mind. Also, another thing, does it have exposed roof boards? Sometimes these things look really cool. Many times they have the natural wood that's refinished and it looks super cool in pictures. But that also means that you don't have the insulation that's between the roof. Many times it's just the roof, and then you got the exposed roof boards there. So if you have stuff like that, especially if you're not in a coastal area where you need to crank the AC a lot, expect higher energy costs to keep that place heated and cooled. Many times you'll see that on lower ceilings too. So if you were to close it off and drywall it, it might actually feel like you're shrinking the space too. So things to be aware of. Now, if the property has a fireplace, is it wood burning or is it gas? A lot of people don't really care about fireplaces in California, but it's something to be aware of. Windows, are they dual pane or are they single pane? Now, currently, most homes in Southern California are going to have dual pane, maybe even triple pane if you're bougie. But if you have dual pane windows, something to look for as you're walking through the property is there any moisture between the panes of the windows? And often if windows are 10, 20 years old, you're going to see a window here or there that has a failed seal, and you're going to see some of that moisture. And for the most part, that's an aesthetic issue. It does somewhat decrease the efficiency of keeping hot air and cold air in or out. But when you have quite a few of those windows throughout that have those failed seals and you want to replace those, if the visuals bother you, that could be quite costly. So something to keep in mind. Now, as you're going through the property, are there any doors that get stuck on the floor or maybe don't line up with the door jamb the right way? Could be settling, could be other issues, could be poor workmanship. Same thing with the windows. Are the windows operable? Now, and a good inspector is going to go through and check a representative number, if not all, of the windows and doors throughout the house. But still, if you're going through there and you're already seeing some issues right off the bat, especially in older homes, could suggest that you got some bigger issues underlying there. As you're walking through the property, are there any obvious settling cracks in the drywall or in the ceiling? If they're in every room, you probably got some issues. Otherwise, maybe a small crack here and there, settling crack isn't a big deal. Something to look for as you're walking through. Looking at the floors, again, when we're talking about if we're on a slab or on a raised foundation, this could point to different things depending on what we're talking about. If we're on a slab and we have cracked tile floors and you see a crack that's following through multiple tiles, you might have something going on with the foundation. Depending on the types of floors you're looking at too as you go through the property, different ones have different benefits. LVP, luxury vinyl plank, is pretty much the go-to in much of construction nowadays. From affordable housing to even higher end luxury homes, many builders are using LVP. It's vinyl, it's waterproof, it's durable. There's a lot of benefits to it. If a property has hardwood flooring or engineered hardwood or hardwood planks, there's different ways that might age. Hardwood planks tend to warp and maybe pop up in different areas. Engineered hardwood tends to be pretty durable, but it doesn't necessarily have the same refinishing longevity as other ones, even though much of it is pretty durable. Now, as you're walking through the property, make sure you go into the garage, take a look at the water heater, the forced air unit. Maybe you have a furnace closet, depending on where you are. If you're an older home, you might not have any of these, but look at the forced air unit. If the furnace is newer, I love properties that have newer furnaces, newer roofs, and everything else is outdated, because generally speaking, those are going to be some of the biggest, most costly ticket items when it comes to repairs on a property. The HVAC system, roof, electrical work. If they've already gotten these things done, but the rest of the property is outdated, it's generally a good sign that the property's been well maintained and they got some of the big ticket items out of the way for you. But most of the time, that's not going to drastically increase the sales price of the property. And many times I find on properties like that, where the big ticket items have been cared for and everything else is outdated, the inspections on the property are generally going to be pretty good as well, because the property's been cared for. Now, some things to look for when you're looking at flipped properties in Southern California. Here's some things that flippers are actually doing, in some cases getting away with. Painting roofs. So maybe you have that old asphalt roof and, all the granules aren't off, but it's towards the end of its life. I've seen them straight up spray paint the roof black or something just to make it look like it's a fresh color. And, an inspector's going to find that for sure. But to the eyes, a lot of buyers don't know what they're looking for, and they might see, oh, it's a fresh black, and to them it looks new. So in their mind, they're considering it a positive, when in reality, this is a bad thing. Another thing too, if you're seeing a lot of repairs around the exterior, like they're filled with Bondo, where maybe it was termite damage or something like that, and it was just painted over. If you look at the details like that, you can often tell the quality of the workmanship. And if you're seeing stuff like that, looks like Bondo repairs, in some cases, it's applicable. It's the right way to do things. If part of the wood is inaccessible and it's just a cosmetic detail. If you're finding 1, 2, or 3 of these things just by looking lightly, there's probably a lot more that's underneath the surface that you're not seeing. Also look at things like tile work. Look in tiled showers. Look at the floor and see how they did the tile work in there. If it looks like it wasn't planned out, if it's not symmetrical in the way it was planned, you're probably not having professional tilers, professional tradesmen doing the work. Little things like that, again, if you're finding a few of them here and there, that can often point to the person hiring these people for this work didn't look for the best in what they were doing. They just often were looking for the cheapest. So if you see a few things like that and they start adding up, you can get a sense for how the rest of the property is going to look. What about things that are behind the walls? How are those done? Were they done the right way? Was the electrical done by a licensed electrician? Was the plumbing done by the right plumber? Very important to pay attention to the quality of tradesman work that was done on the property. When you're walking through a property and you're looking at a place, something might not be a big deal to you, but it's important to keep in mind whether or not this would be something that would dissuade another buyer from moving forward on a purchase. So if you can kind of put this stuff into a framework for when you're walking through a property and you kind of know what you're looking for, and you decide what's important to you, what you're willing to live with, what you won't compromise on, you're going to come to find out it's a lot easier for you to view properties. And when it comes time to making a decision, you're going to make them much more confidently and quickly, because you already know what you're looking for. You know what's important, what's not. Well, I hope you found this video helpful. And if you did, I hope you give us a thumbs up. And if you have any questions or need help buying or selling real estate in Southern California, and you want somebody who's experienced that's going to be on your side and in your corner fighting for you, making sure you're turning over every stone when buying or selling, feel free to reach out. Contact information is below. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.